Namaste, everybody. I will sit down and share my ideas because I have difficulty with my legs at 81. It becomes a little bit difficult. I've used my legs a very long time, for 50 years, teaching, standing. So now my legs are saying enough is enough. Let me begin by saying something about the history, our history, everybody's history. The human history is very, very long. And women are the first to educate or to teach the children, because they are the first gurus of the human race. Because when they give birth, they start teaching the child. They socialize the child into role taking. They teach the child what is right, what is wrong. They teach the child what is they should be doing, not doing, how to be good sons and daughters, how to be good human beings. They are the main teachers of human race. But what has happened, history has many waves. People come, transformations happen, changes occur, some good, some bad, countries evolve, some good, some not in the direction they would like to. And if I talk about India, to give you an idea how that education is changing in India, recently we've had a committee set up called to design new education policy for India. Now, why was it need felt that we had to have a new education policy? Because what we discovered was that for almost a few hundred years, the education was being in the standards of the colonizers who had designed the education system. And when we went into the research, and I have recently finished a 7-year research on what happened to our education system, because our education system was very different. If you look at the 4 generations, sometimes the families are able to see 5 generations. And the 5 generations have a very different value system. I was just listening to somebody, and we were discussing the role of women. And he said, in my grandfather's time, the message to the woman was, you go in standing, but you come out horizontal, which means you get married and enter a home and only come out when you die. And that is when you are, and you have to manage the home no matter what kind of people they are, no matter whether they treat you well, they don't treat you well, you have to live there. The next generation said, okay, you go, suffer for a while, but then don't suffer too much. Then you come back. The third generation, which is just the one generation before me, said, well, your father hasn't died as yet, so if it doesn't work out, it's all right, you come back. So, and therefore, and this generation says, our generation or this generation believes that everything has to be 50-50. And if it isn't 50-50, get a divorce. So if you see the world over, the divorces are increasing. And therefore, the education needs to do something about it, that the marriage as an institution has a meaning. Because the way the God has designed men and women are very different. And therefore, there is a particular role allocated to the physical qualities of the male and the physical qualities of the female. And therefore, I think we have forgotten all of that, and we have gone on to a very cognitive, logical, rational discussion about role of men and women. It has to be distributive, it has to be 50-50, it has to be. And if I look at the Indian education system, it began with the Vedic times. And I have gone to study the Vedic education, what it was like. Like, and you saw the first video, it was all about spirituality. And the second video was all about family being together. So these two were the main constituents of education in the country. Now, our Indians are told that we are ignorant, we are natives, we are primitives. All kinds of attributions have been given to the India as a country. And if you see the history of the country, and history of the country has been wrongly written by the people. It always is. Those who conquer will write their own history. They will not write the real history of the country. Now, when I was doing the research, I discovered that the first school education in the UK was in 1836. Whereas in 1836, we had 174,000 educational institutions. And because that education was mostly spiritual, that education was mostly about family roles, relationships, and how to live a life. How to live a life of values, how to live a life as human beings, how to respect your elders. And everything was so different. When we were growing up, on our birthdays, we were taught hymns, bhajans about gods and about relationships and about family. And we were, as children, we I grew up in a family of 22, and we were a family of 44 total. So whose ever birthday it was would get up early in the morning, would be bathed and scrubbed, wear new clothes, and then go to every elder in the family to get their blessings. Even as it is, every morning we went and did namaste to all our elders and we got the blessings. When somebody was quiet, we would say, "Why are you quiet? Why are you not giving us the blessing?" So as children, we knew we would get a blessing, and blessing means quite a lot. In our culture, blessing means that if elders give you blessings, it really comes true. So we used to get blessings like be educated, be good, have a good husband, have a good family, have this, have this. It was all about being a good human being in a society, in a family. And we never had birthday parties. We had a puja at home, a religious, spiritual ceremony, and then the child will go and distribute food to the poor children, about 40, 50, depending what these parents had decided. So sometimes we fed 100 children on the streets. We would just go out into the car, get down where the children were on the streets and distribute food to them. Now, there was no birthday party, so even today, I've rarely had a birthday party for my son. I've always had a puja, and then and even today on his birthday, I distribute food to 100 street children. It's a tradition in the home, and my son quite likes it. And my son will say, "Ma, send me a video that you have distributed the food." So it is something which was taught, and that has all been vanished. The British decided, the colonizers decided that if we really wanted to rule India for a long time, we have to destroy their education system. So what they did was they went systematically killing all the teachers, all the gurus of the ashrams, which were the residential school, and killed off all the students. So they said not a single trace of knowledge was left in the country for them. And then the country had an amnesia for 200 years that we ever had such a good education system. It is now that we are beginning to discover that what we are doing is not really right. What we are following in terms of education is not really our history. It makes no emotional gut level sense. So a committee was set up to design a new education policy. Now, even before this new education policy came into being, I had retired from IIM in 2005, and I was asked by two donors, whether I could set up a management institute for them. And I said, no, management institute I don't want to set up because it has too many lacunas. It has too many things which I don't like. So they said, what would you do? I said, I will set up a college called, for a want of a better word, I said a liberal education, holistic interdisciplinary education. undergraduate and postgraduate. And then I made a presentation to them in which the technology was different, the methodology was different, the curriculum was different. They had so many new things into it based on what I had collected over 50 years, that what was wrong with the education system. So for example, two things I made very sure. One was called the Discover India program. That is, the students had to first identify the heritage sites from the Google, and they would identify about 100, 150 heritage sites. Then they had to choose one. And with a teacher, they had to prepare a list of questions asking why it was a heritage site. And then they had to visit that site for 10 days, live there, and discover all the folk tales, the folklore, the parables, all the kind of things which were around that heritage site. And then they would write a report. They would write three kinds of report. One would be an absolute research report. Second would be a creative report. What happened to them when they visited these sites, when they saw these sites? See, some were 800 years old, some were 900 years old. And one group visited like Rajasthan, and they were amazed with the pagdi, the headgear they were wearing. And they discovered there were 249 headgears the people were wearing, each representing a different color combination, and a different meaning. Some was for mourning, some was for marriage, some was for a childbirth, some was for this. And they were amazed that our distribution and categorization was so in detail and what it meant. So that was one course which really made the students feel proud of their country, proud of their heritage, and they discovered that we had art and heritage which did not exist anywhere in the world before. So this I made it compulsory, and then I made a second course which was compulsory for the undergraduates, which was a developmental activity program. The two courses were known as DIP and DAP, Discover India program and Developmental Activity program. Developmental activity program was about the social issues. Why is India like this? There were many wrong things in India, but why has it happened? And what made it happen? And we identified this, that India is known as an agricultural society, but it is actually not an agricultural society. It is a production-based society. Every household was a production unit. You take weavers, the whole weaver community, every household had a different motive, had a different weave, had a different texture, different fabric. The jewelry they designed, the handicrafts they designed, that there were communities after communities, were all into production. And that is why India was contributing to 49% of the GDP of the world contribution. This was, and now we are contributing 4%. I mean, that's a sad drop. And we have been made to say that we are an agrarian society, but we are not an agrarian society. We were a production-based society. Now, that is why if you see, Indian entrepreneurs do exceedingly well because they have it in their DNA to be business people, to do trading, to do this. And all this we had forgotten because of the education system and the kind of things we accepted as Indians, that was us. So we, I had been a faculty for 34 years in the best of the management institution, not only in the country, but in the world. Our management students, when they graduate, have done their PhDs and become presidents, deans, directors of American University. Right now, one of my students is the dean of Harvard University. One of them was the president of Atlanta, Georgia Tech University. Now, they are intelligent people, but we were made to believe, and when I was teaching, I found out that many of our students had a very low self-worth and very low self-esteem. And therefore, this had to change. So when I designed the liberal education program, this changed. And many of the people said, "Ke your students are very arrogant." I said, no, they are not arrogant. They are very proud of who they are. And now being realistically proud of oneself is not being called arrogant. Now, arrogant is one, thank you. My students have, students especially graduating from the undergraduate and graduate, have done many new things. For example, some have gone to the US and or gone to Canada, and from liberal education, the choices were many. It, our education system is arts, science, and commerce. There are three canals. Once you get into the canal tube, you can't get out. You just have to go through it, whether you like it or whether you don't like it. But the new technology is that you have 2 years to decide what you like and what you don't like. And then you take a subject which you like and therefore in which you can do well. For example, my one student took maths and he took music. He had a choice of elective course as music. Now he's a Bollywood director, very famous, himself a celebrity. He kind of composes such good music that he's gone into Bollywood and made his mark. And as an 18, 19-year-old graduating and making a mark in Bollywood, which is so competitive and so tightly knit with few families, very difficult, but he's broken through because his music was so good. And the whole focus has been of education is to be so good, that no matter how many competitors you are or how many closed doors you get, people will accept you. That is the nature of the education system I have set up in Pune called FLAME. It has now become a FLAME University. Now, the new education policy has been based on credit system. Anybody can take, and you take as many courses as you want, the courses you like, and then you can move into other regions of the country with your credits and then complete your education. Earlier, it was not possible. I came back from US. When I got married, to tell you, I was 18 years old and just out of high school. And I wanted to study. So I studied in America, I studied in Denmark, and when I came back, no university would give me admission. They said, on what basis do we give you education? I said, I have so many credits, I have done so many courses. But they said, they don't belong here. We don't have any courses like this. And that was a sad part, because they only have these fixed art, science, commerce courses, and not the other kinds of courses. Finally, I got admission after 1 year of knowing people, lawyers, advocates. I just went really after, and I said I want admission in a college. I want to do my BA. My husband was a PhD in physics, and I said I can't be a high school wife. I have to be a graduate wife. So finally, I got admission in a college, but then the family dynamics was such that I couldn't pursue. So we went back to the US and I completed my education. 8 years after my marriage, I did my BA. 16 years later, 9 years later, I did my master's. And 16 years later, I completed my PhD. So pursuing, but it was possible afterwards. And now our education system is such that this is possible. You can do this subject here, that subject here, do little bit here, little bit there, and complete your education. And I am in fact suggesting that to a university to help me start a women's program where women can take only one course in a term or 2 courses, and they collect certificates and eventually get a degree. Because there are many women who, like me, get married early, want to be a graduate, but have no options. But today there is an option. And I have said, let them take one course, doesn't matter. Let them take 10 years to complete a BA. But if they want to fulfill their dream of completing a graduate school, they should be able to do it. And I think it will work. So the education has become, and for me, my whole life is nothing but education. I was 8 years old when I started a school. My father had a textile mill. So I used to teach all the workers' children, 25 of them, some 14-year-old, some 15-year-old, how to read, how to write, how to do arithmetic, how to add, subtract, divide, and multiply. That was my father said, and he built a nice little shed for me and gave some, there used to be these small slates um, with, a, with a chalk. And so he distributed those, and I used to go Sunday morning and Wednesday morning, and I was to get out of the home, getting all dressed up and saying, I'm going to teach. I'm going to my class. I'm going to my school to teach them. And there was such a good feeling of doing that. And most of those children who at least learned these three things from me had a good job, a good life, and they had far better prospects of earning money than if they hadn't had that education. So education connected to occupation does damage, but education for learning for life does a very good thing. So that is my whole focus on educating women especially, to make sure they have the opportunity to learn, they have the opportunity to study, and the more they study, the better is the family life, the better is the life for everybody, because if they are educated, the whole family is educated. And my role model has been my father's eldest sister, who was a principal of a girls' boarding college. And I had spent time with her, and she spent time with me. And I think I have her brains and her passion to teach girls. She was a scholar in Sanskrit, and she emphasized education and said, and she would make sure that we all sat down to do our lessons and study. So I think somebody in the home ought to take the responsibility of saying the children should be educated. And it's not that educated in terms of getting an occupation, but definitely in terms of getting an opportunity to bring their potentials into. And today, you see, I tell you, when the high school board exams results are out, in Gujarat especially, where I live, about half are on the top 10, top 10. Top 10 are girls. Top 10, 7 are girls. Many, very often, 8 are girls. And so the girls are intelligent. I think they discovered it that they are intelligent, so they work very hard and they do very well. So thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. I'm honored that you are listening. And I am very concerned about the education system. Especially both boys and girls ought to have enough self-respect, self-worth, and self-pride. And education's most important is to give it to them. That they need to have self-worth and self-esteem first, then they can conquer the world. Thank you very much.